absolutely loving my new setup. Hi guys, welcome back to True Crime and Tea, where we sip slowly and we think deeply. I am Lily, your academic mama. If this is your first time here, welcome. We talk about true crime cases and we have a bit of an academic look at them. We look at them a bit more critically. That comes at the end. For now, we can get into today's case. So today's case takes us to the unsettling intersection of childhood trauma and fractured attachment, as well as the devastating consequences that emerge when early wounds are unaddressed. This is a story of Diane Downs, a woman whose public persona as a devoted mother masked a lifetime of emotional instability, unresolved trauma, and ultimately unthinkable violence. As always, we approach these cases with respect for the victims, clarity about the facts, and commitment to understanding the psychological and systemic factors that shape criminal behaviour. So let's begin. Elizabeth Diane Downs, or Elizabeth Diane Fredrickson, was born on the 7th of August 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. Her childhood was severely marked with familial dysfunction, including constant marital conflict between her parents, who divorced when she was an infant. Her mother, Willardine, struggled to balance maternal duties and employment, which meant that she ended up leaving Diane feeling undervalued and emotionally isolated. At the age of 12, Diane suffered SA by her father, which kind of warped her understanding of love and relationships. And these early hardships shaped the development of an insecure attachment style, which was characterized by emotional detachment and defense mechanisms that would later manifest in her adult relationships. In 1973, she married a man called Stephen Downs, and the couple had 3 children together: Christy, Cheryl, and Danny. By 1983, Diane was working as a postal worker in Springfield, Oregon, while navigating a tumultuous personal life which was marked by messy affairs and entanglements. Her most significant relationship at the time was with a married colleague called Nick Knickerbocker. I'm not joking, that's what his name was. Does anyone remember those ice creams? Knickerbocker Glory. That's a mouthful to say. I do remember them. They were lovely. But you can't find them in the shops anymore. Anyway, his name was Nick Knickerbocker. He was adamant that he had no interest in being a father, which reminds us of another case. This case, if anyone's watched this video on Susan Smith, who was also seeing a man who didn't want to have children, and that led to her doing certain things to her children. Watch the story. So, on the night of the 19th of May 1983, Diane Downs sped into the emergency room of Mackenzie Williamette Hospital in Springfield, Oregon, with her 3 gravely wounded children in the car. 7-year-old Cheryl was already dead. 8-year-old Christy was barely clinging to life. And 3-year-old Danny had been paralyzed by a bullet to his spine. Downs herself had been shot once in the left forearm, and she had wrapped the wound with a towel, but the injury wasn't life-threatening. She was fine. She told the police somewhat of a crazy story. She said that she had been flagged down by a bushy-haired stranger on a dark, deserted country road who attempted to carjack her vehicle. According to her account, the man reached into the car and shot her sleeping children before she managed to escape. However, investigators immediately noted that there were a number of inconsistencies with the story that she was telling. She claimed that she was sightseeing at night in pitch darkness. First red flag. Her children were fatally wounded while her injuries were only minor. And as a right-handed person, being shot in the left arm seems a bit suspicious. So they clocked her from when she told her story. Also, her demeanor during the interviews was unusually calm, and she was very, very detached from someone who had just experienced what would be an extraordinary trauma. And because of this, the investigation revealed that there was something not up, but she also had a clear motive for wanting her children to be out of the picture. During the investigation, they discovered in her diary that she was obsessed with Knickerbocker. Remember the guy that she was having a affair with? Because remember, she's married. Yeah, the guy that she's also having an affair with, that's a married man. She had written in her diary obsessively about him, but this was also the gentleman that didn't want children. She had reportedly told him that she can't have any more children and that she's got to do something with the children she already has. This is what I found. Whether she actually said that or not, who knows? But apparently that's what she said. After months of investigation, the prosecution's case hinged greatly on testimony from her surviving daughter, Christy, who took the stage at a very, she was only 9 years old when she gave her testimony, and she stated that her mother had shot all 3 children while they were parked on the side of the road. And then she shot herself to make it seem like someone else had committed the crime. And let's pause for a second, because she claimed that someone was hijacking her vehicle. Why would they shoot the children and not just shoot her? Do you know what I mean? Why would they get rid of the children? The children aren't going to drive the car off, especially given their ages. They were all under the age of 10. Why shoot the children and not just shoot the mum that's driving the car, or drag the woman out the car and then drive off? She didn't really think this through very well. But there was also the fact that the forensic evidence was extremely overwhelming. There was blood spatter analysis which confirmed the prosecution's version of the story, that then caused Diane's story to collapse when it was scrutinized. When it was looked at under a magnifying glass, it just made absolutely no sense. Then in 1984, a jury unanimously convicted her of homicide, 2 counts of attempted homicide, and 2 counts of assault. She was then sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. I personally would have locked her up and thrown away the key, but they thought she would, they gave her parole or possibility of parole after 25 years. Now, this for me takes the cake, because shortly after her trial, Downs gave birth to her 4th child. So she was pregnant at the time of going through the court case. This child, however, was immediately adopted. Her surviving children, so Christy and Danny was paralysed and Christy was the one that gave testimony. They were adopted by the lead prosecutor in the case. I couldn't really understand why they didn't go back to their dad, but the lead prosecutor adopted them. There wasn't anything that kind of explained why. So in July 1987, Downs briefly escaped Oregon Women's Correctional Institution, but she was then recaptured after 10 days of her escape. Following this, she was transferred to a prison in New Jersey and then one in Washington, before ultimately being incarcerated in California, where she currently remains. There were some psychological evaluations done which have consistently diagnosed her with narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial personality disorders, with one psychiatrist labeling her as a deviant sociopath. If you want to know the difference between a psychopath and sociopath, in this video I go into the differences. She is a deviant sociopath. A 2008 evaluation noted that she had a profound lack of self-reflection after decades of incarceration. She was a narcissist, and narcissists don't really think they're ever wrong, so that doesn't really surprise me. By year 20, what the psychiatrist said was, by year 20, one hopes that the life prisoner has come to a place of deeper self-reflection. The thing that is most troubling regarding Miss Downs is that she appears to have done very little of this. Because of this lack of self-reflection, it's no surprise that Diane Downs has repeatedly had her parole denied, and the earliest possible release that she's going to have, according to records, would have been in 2025 when I did this research. So there may be some possibility of her getting out this year, but from what I found, she hasn't been released yet at the point of this recording. However, maybe she's been let out. I don't think she's going to get let out. For someone who got a life sentence and does not show any remorse, I don't see how that person can be let out of prison again. But she continues to maintain her innocence. She published a book entitled Best Kept Secrets that attempts to exonerate her. I don't know how giving a book a title of the best kept secret is going to exonerate you, because it implies you have a secret to keep. The secret that you're keeping is that you commit the homicides of your child and the attempted homicides of her children. I don't know. But she has refused to accept that she was the one that is responsible for the death of one child, the paralyzing of another child, and the attempted homicide of another child, whilst the two of them probably are living with the trauma of what's happened to them at the hands of their mother. Now, the academic lens I want to look at in this case in particular is the attachment theory and the development of criminal behaviours linked to attachment theory. Attachment theory provides a framework, a very compelling framework, for understanding Diane Downs' kind of, how did she become this person? How did we get here today talking about a mother that has unalived her two children? And essentially, she has gone from a traumatized child to a perpetrator of familial homicide. She committed something called infanticide, which is where you unalive your own children. According to attachment theory, early relational experiences critically shape emotional and social development patterns that persist into adulthood. Individuals with insecure attachment frequently display characteristics such as aggression, impulsiveness, and profound challenges in establishing healthy relationships. She was not able to have a healthy relationship with her husband. She regularly cheated on him, and then obviously the relationship she had with her children was also unhealthy. And these factors correlate significantly with criminal conduct. The application to Diane's case is particularly illuminating because her childhood was marked by intense family strife and emotional neglect. Mum was not able to look after her. So from her mother, there was that feeling that she didn't feel loved by her mum. And then that was compounded by the essay from her father. So both of her parents essentially have created an environment that is not healthy for any child to grow up in. These experiences likely fostered either avoidant or ambivalent attachment style, causing her to view caregivers as unreliable and relationships as fundamentally unsafe. It has been documented in attachment literature. Children with such attachment styles often become adults who are excessively self-reliant or pathologically dependent on others for validation. In Downs' case, her behaviour reflects both extremes. Her fierce independence and career ambition coexisted with the desperate need for male validation that ultimately motivated her crime. Her father's harsh and distant parenting likely compelled a young Diane to adopt a defense mechanism like emotional detachment to cope with her unmet emotional needs. This detachment became the hallmark of her adult personality, evident in her flat kind of presence during the police interviews. They said she was very, very calm and kind of emotionless. And also her inability to display appropriate emotional responses to her children's suffering. They said for someone that has just lost children or lost a child and has two injured children, she wasn't really displaying the behaviors that would be expected to see from someone that's going through that trauma. So attachment theory suggests that these defense strategies, while they are protective in childhood, they establish foundations for dysfunctional adult relationships and problematic relational behaviors, which I think we can say are very evident in Diane Downs' case. The link between insecure attachment and criminality is actually well documented in research that examines child to parent violence and intergenerational trauma. Downs represents an extreme manifestation of this pattern. Rather than directing violence towards her parents, where this all started, she basically annihilated the next generation. So that's where it's child to parent violence. Her obsession with Knickerbocker and her willingness to sacrifice her children to maintain that relationship reflects a distorted attachment system in which her romantic attachment superseded the maternal bonds. The fact that she wanted this man so much made her children effectively irrelevant. They needed to be dealt with, from like what she said in her diary. So this shows how attachment theory moves beyond like a simplistic evil mother narrative. We have spoken about the evil mother trope before. It's very easy to label a mother that commits these crimes as evil because mothers are supposed to feel maternal. They're supposed to want to care for their children. Nothing outside of that should impact the way a mother feels about a child, especially not a man. That's the kind of concept that, you know, the stereotype that has been created by society. So with this evil mother trope, you would just assume that, oh, she unalived her children, there is no other explanation for it. However, looking at the attachment theory, whilst it does not negate what she's done, it does not give her an out. Essentially, it doesn't give justification for her actions. It allows us to understand that it goes beyond evil mother. It goes beyond just being able to label someone as evil because they've committed a crime. It allows us to understand why behaviors are behaviors, why someone would act the way that they've acted, essentially. So it goes beyond that simplistic evil mother narrative to reveal the developmental pathways through which early trauma, insecure attachment, and the subsequent personality pathology that goes into or ends up being lethal violence. For true crime analysis, this lens kind of offers viewers a framework for understanding how the unthinkable, mum unaliving her children, becomes possible when foundational human bonds are fractured in childhood. Essentially, the abuse from her dad, the neglect from her mother, though this is not the case for everybody, because we know many people that have gone through similar circumstances do not turn into Diane Downs and actually are the polar opposites. They dote on their children, but it does give us an understanding as to how those foundations can, don't always do, but can create the circumstances for the violence that we see with the Diane Downs case. The Diane Downs case is often reduced to shock value, kind of like the Susan Smith case. Oh my goodness, how can a mother do that? But when we look a bit deeper, we see a complex portrait of early trauma, insecure attachment, and personality pathology converging into catastrophic ways. The label that I'm thinking of now is the deviant sociopath and the narcissist, but it That's what it's created. It's created the environment for catastrophe. But understanding these developmental pathways doesn't excuse the violence. It does not give justification for the violence. It helps us recognize the warning signs, the systemic failures, and the generational patterns that allow harm to escalate. We always talk about, if there was intervention, would that have led to prevention? By examining cases like this through a psychological and sociological lens, we honour the victims and strengthen our collective understanding of how violence emerges and how it may be prevented. It's not always going to be prevented, but how it may be prevented. As always, guys, it was lovely sitting down with you today, looking through this case through a bit of an academic lens. I will say thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and take care of others. Always question the narrative, ask lots of questions, critique the facts, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.